recording starts. Well, good morning, dear friends, friends of unity, friends of truth, friends of the many paths to God. I bring a little bit of secondary scholarship to you today, and I'm going to explore the ideas that come from an essay. I've shared this in the past, and this scholarship is really the product of a John O. Reed, and it appeared in a publication called Forerunner in 1994. And I've shared this article. Maybe some of you have seen this, but what I'm going to do is take some of this material to explore the time when Jesus was actually born. We know what the churches, in their wisdom and in their goodwill, we know what they have told us about these events, and they have been reorganized. These events have been reorganized over many years. So I'd like to refer to the Gospels and to other books in the Bible to explore what we have to go on. What are the facts? What are the facts? So I put an email forth that listed some references I'm going to look at. And among them was the book by Josephus. Flavius Josephus was a historian, a Jewish historian, and he wrote in about the 2nd century of this common era. And one of his books was the Jewish Antiquities. And he wrote several. Another one is the Jewish War, and by Josephus. And these Penguin classics are really wonderful. It's a cheap way to build a library. I've read into, not cover to cover, I've read into a good number of them, and they are a good buy. But in the back of this, there's an appendix which gives reference in the book, The Jewish War. It gives reference to the ministry and the crucifixion of Jesus. So for Jews who may be saying that there's no proof that Jesus ever existed, well, this is evidence. Is it proof? I can't use that word. Is it evidence? Yes, it's evidence. And Josephus was one of their guys. Now, I have a Hasidic friend with much love and respect for my friend, who says that Josephus ratted out the Jews to the Romans. And whether this is true or not, I'm not sure. And what exactly was ratted out, there again, I'm not sure. And I come from a background of rigorous and vigorous scholarship. I like to do the detective work. I love to handle books. I love to go to a well-stocked library. And my own spiritual library in the next room is pretty good. It's a pretty good library. It could take you through a master's degree on some subjects. But the point being that when we look at the references, we gain confidence in our faith. So the Josephus is available to you. Also, there is a PDF of the Jewish Antiquities, another volume of works by Flavius Josephus. And in the Antiquities, there are references to the way the temple in Jerusalem was organized. And that's going to be important when we talk about when Jesus was actually born. So also the books in the Bible, we have Chronicles 1 and Luke and Matthew and Malachi. Malachi announced that Jesus was going to come, or the Messiah. Whether or not his name was going to be Jesus, another subject. And also I forwarded to some of you on this list that there is a pie graph showing the organization and the common ground among the Gospels. And if you did not receive that, I'll be happy to send it out again. You just email me. You know how to find me. I'm easy to find. So among all of these things, the core is, what is good scholarship? One of the things is we should try not to assume anything. Words like could, would, should, these are subjunctive words. They don't belong in proof. There is evidence, yes, but proof is another thing. So I'm going to allude to evidence, not necessarily knowing if I can prove anything at all, except what has been written. So taking this article, I've gone through this a number of times. This thing, printing it out, it's just a bunch of paper. You know, this business. You know what paper is? Comes from papyrus. Papyrus. And in this paper, I had to reorganize a lot of this stuff because sometimes when an article is written from the very specific ideas out to the big picture, sometimes I don't get it. I have to see the big picture, the general, and then go down to the specific. That is what works for me. So the very general idea is you can go back into the book of Malachi, and you can see where it is said in chapter 3, going down, the messenger of the covenant, in whom you delight, indeed he is coming, says the Lord of hosts. But who can endure the day of his coming? And who can stand when he appears? So that's a pretty vague idea, but the Messiah is coming. That's Malachi chapter 3. So another factor in determining when Jesus was born is going through Luke now. There's a whole bunch of places. There are many places in Luke where it is described about the birth and who is pregnant and who is expecting babies. Well, we know that the book Luke chapter 1, verse 5 through chapter 2, approximately verse 8. There are a lot of things there. I'm going to go to my own. I have here a Catholic edition of a study Bible. It's not much to look at, but it's here. And in Luke, let's see, we're going to have a place where we look at okay, I'm here. The book of John the Baptist foretold the birth of John the Baptist. There was the priestly order of Abijah. Abijah. Now, this is one name among 24. There were 24 orders of priests that each served 1 week each. And we're looking at the Hebrew calendar here. And the Jewish calendar is lunar and solar. And those months overlap. Now, there's a Jewish cemetery in Falls Church on Lee Highway. You can see it. And they give out calendars, the Jewish calendar overlapping with the Gregorian calendar. And there it's easy to see when the Jewish months in their calendar start and end. And there it's an accessible idea for everyone. You can get these things online too. So there's no real reason to do without some of these facts. So we know from Corinthians now, I'm going to turn back into Corinthians, where Chronicles, forgive me, Chronicles. Now in chapter 24, the divisions of the priests are listed. I'm looking at 1 Chronicles, chapter 24. The divisions of the descendants of Aaron were these. And then going down, it goes through the 24 houses of the priests. Many of these names I've never heard pronounced, and I will not attempt them. But in those 24 houses, the order of priests that were in charge at that time was the order of Abijah. So we know approximately the time of year when they were in charge. Now, as we go through the ideas, the facts we have, we know that Zacharias was performing his duties during the course of Abijah. And we knew that from the texts, we know that Elizabeth conceived around that time. And we know that Mary conceived in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy. And we know then, deducing from that, we know that John was born approximately 6 months after Jesus. So we look at these facts as listed. The fact is that these ideas are spoken of in the Bible. That's the fact. Whether or not they happened exactly, now that is a matter of faith. So here again, good scholarship says that we should be aware of what is a fact and what is not a fact. And that comes up over and over in good, vigorous scholarship. So in looking at another source, now I don't have this source, but there was a Frank R. Coulter who wrote A Harmony of the Gospels. And he computes that the year 5 BC, 5 BCE, we can say, was the first day of the first month, the month of Nisan, Nisan, the Jewish month, according to the Hebrew calendar. It was a Sabbath. And then in the Julian calendar, that overlaps. Now, the Julian calendar and the Gregorian calendar are slightly different. They have different applications of leap years, which I will not go into. You know, it's really interesting. Those of you who might be astrology buffs, you know that when you look at the ephemerides, the books of the positions of planets, you can see how sometimes you have to use the Julian calendar, and the computations can be confusing. So when scholars look at this, when philologists analyze some of the books and the papers of these different eras, there is a lot of confusion that can result. So careful calculation is really necessary here. So now when we project forward another 6 months to Jesus's birth from all the information we have, the most probable time of his birth occurred between September 16th and September 29th. So maybe between these two dates, the last 2 weeks of September this month, maybe that is the time when Jesus was placed. You know, that's too strong a word in my opinion, because sometimes the word lie is too strong. Maybe it is misguided wisdom. Maybe it is a way that the church wanted to gather people together to give us the date of Jesus's birth as December 25th. If it was December 25th, well, then the sheep would not have been in the pasture. Now, this is a biological necessary. In the ancient world, the sheep had to be brought in the cold weather and put under a shelter or inside a building or some way protected from the cold. That was not the case when Jesus was born. The sheep were out. They were out in the field. They were still grazing. So we know that it would have to have been warmer weather. And that is alluded to in some commentaries on the Bible. I have not looked at these either. Clark's commentary. There are 6 volumes of commentary on the Bible. So if you don't trust the words on some of these books, then do your own research. It's fun. Man, it's fun. And you can look also at a source of wisdom when you're doing your research. And this is a wonderful source. The International Baccalaureate Organization, they have some rubrics that they think are important in scholarship. I'm putting them up on the screen here. And those of you watching the recording will be able to pause anywhere to see what these are. But one of these things is, how is it connected to other things? And what are the points of view? What is our responsibility? How do we know? The inner reflection that we do on all of this knowledge, extraordinarily important. How do we know? And that's where the academic in every person can come out, to look at how we know. Well, I'm not going to do this for a very, very long time, because there's going to be a lot of debate, a lot of things that we can think about and what to say about what we have learned. And if you go through these scriptures And I'm happy to forward the article again to anyone who wants it. You know how to find me. I said that already. But when you look up some of these scriptures, I did not see words that might be misinterpreted in a big way. And that might be important because we want to remember that from the Hebrew language into Greek and to English, back and forth, many translations have been consulted to get what we think is the Bible of today, what we think of as the Judeo-Christian Bible of today. Now, the hallmark of the Jewish faith in their Pentateuch, the 5 books written by Moses, they say that the Hebrew name, of course, we know that the Hebrew language now, modern Hebrew, has the diacritical marks pronunciation because there are no vowels in the Hebrew language. There are 22 letters in Hebrew, and you just have to know when you read the ancient scriptures in Hebrew, there are no vowels. You just have to know. And there you will get the pronunciation handed down over the centuries. So their hallmark is that the Hebrew scriptures have not been changed. And that is an element of faith too. What is faith? What is belief? And what is fact? You know, we want to sift through these ideas in a healthy way. So here we have it. Evidence, not proof now. Evidence says that Jesus was born in the second half of September. And so I wish you well. Now, tying into this idea, we're having the fall equinox pretty soon, when the day and the night are going to be equal. And the ancient Persians knew about this. They were the great astrologers, the first astrologers, and they were studying about this long before telescopes. And we, of course, know that astrology gave way to astronomy, just as alchemy developed into chemistry. And so the wisdom of those sciences is with us all the time, all the time. So when we look at the equinoxes, you know, in the space of one lifetime, about 70 years, the point of Earth that faces into the sun in the equinoxes goes 1 second of 1 degree earlier each 70 years. So in approximately the life of one human being, that equinox moves back 1/360th of a degree, right? Each degree, 60 minutes. Each minute, 60 seconds. So the equinoxes are going backwards, and about every 27,000 years, the equinox will happen again in the same place of the astrological year. And so this was known in the time of Jesus's birth. And there were a lot of calculations. The 3 magi, the magicians, the astrologers, the 3 magi are said to be Persian astrologers. And they were looking for Jesus. It is also said that they didn't just find him on the night of the birth. It might have taken about 2 years for them to find Jesus. So it didn't happen right away. So all these timelines in the Bible, we want to take them with good humor. You know, when I myself started to study about the scriptures, not only the Judeo-Christian Bible, but also some things about the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, and the Guru Granth Sahib, and the Dhammapada. All these holy books are meaningful, and all together they're a treasure of human knowledge and a treasure of human nature as well. So as we explore, we find out more and more connections that exist, connections that are. So at this time, I'm going to stop my talk, and I'll be happy to share anything that I have talked about or mentioned during my brief talk, which is on the subject of when Jesus may have really been born. Not only the wisdom handed down to us, but through empirical research in the scriptures. What do we come up with? So I appreciate that you have listened today, And so I'm going to remove my spectacles here and rejoin the group of the seeing.
John, would you like to leave the recording going, or should I stop it at this point?
Let's leave it going, Neil, since you asked.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And I'll leave it to you when you want to stop the recording. Is that good too?
Yeah. Hopefully it will be recorded.
Okay.
So if you all like to unmute and ask Professor John any questions you may have, go ahead and do so.
John, I thought your talk was illuminating, and I sure do. I think it's compelling that it was in a warmer time in September. Late September sounds good. How did I was a little confused on how we figured out that it took 2 years for the Persians to find Jesus. Is that just the travel time average on a camel, or do we have a basis for that, or do you know? I
Thank
don't.
you. Great question, Leon. That does not come from the Bible verses that I consulted. That comes from some historical notes for which I do not have a source. I'm sorry for that. And I'll tell you when I don't know something. I would never presume. I do not know the source for that. But through their travels and because of the lack of communication, not even mail, it was all hearsay and occasional travelers through towns. And that's how the information was probably conveyed. So that's all I have. Thanks, Leon.
All right. Well, I have a second question. Just off the top of your head, it doesn't matter one whit, but if Jesus was born in late September, what was his astrological sign then?
Oh, great question.
I don't know.
Well, if I only rely on popular song lyrics, it would be the age of Aquarius, but I don't know. I
Well, that's
don't
all right.
know. It's somebody does know. And I invite anybody else to look up that research and see when he was born, what the astrological sign was. Great question. It's pertinent.
If it's the end of September, it's Libra.
As we know it. Okay.
That's the way that
Is it the scales?
yeah. I don't know what the first part. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Jody.
Yeah, I read a interesting book. It's called Caesar's Messiah, and they said in there that Josephus actually wrote for the Romans about the Romans going through I guess to Jerusalem, and that the way they went through Jerusalem to conquer or put down the rebellion was the same tract of that Jesus is, he started here and ended up in Jerusalem. Well, it matches Titus Flavius's campaign, and he's the son of his father became Caesar. I think it was after Nero burned down everything. The Flavians were actually, what would you call them? Oh, they were military people. They came back to, put Rome back in order. And then they became the emperor's line. And actually, some of the early churches were named after their servants.
Oh.
Yeah, and they said the story of the 3 men on the cross. Well, Josephus was with Flavius, being his what do you call it? I guess historian, and that he came across 3 people on crosses that he knew, and asked them to be brought down. Only one survived, and they thought in this book that story was actually the crucifixion story, and then there was another group in Jewish scholars or not Jewish scholars, Jewish, they would be merchants, rich merchants in Egypt who contributed to writing also, but along with Josephus. I thought it was interesting. I don't know one way or the other. They just pointed to things.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Again, more pertinent ideas. There's a
Mhm.
book published by the Rosicrucian Order, Amorc, and the Mystical Life of Jesus. Now, unfortunately, there's no documentation. They say in the book that the knowledge comes from ancient Tibetan manuscripts, but they don't identify them. It is known that there is a temple in Tibet named after Jesus. We know about this, but the ideas of his traveling to Tibet, those are conjectural things. Did he actually go?
Excuse
But
me.
also the idea of his crucifixion. There's one idea in the book that says that Jesus survived the crucifixion, and that he was even able to be escorted back to other places. And because he was an adept, because he was psychically developed, he was able to make appearances after his death. And these are conjectural things too. But there are things to think about because we know that psychic abilities have been cultivated over many centuries. And what one person can do, another person can do. What
John,
one person can
I
Sir.
got some dates to add too. Our neighbor, I think they're Ethiopians, celebrated New Year's yesterday and they invited us in. I think Ethiopian or Somalia. I think it's Ethiopia. So their New Year's was yesterday. And the Jewish New Year, well, actually, it starts with Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, is September 24th. The Jewish New Year begins, I guess, at Rosh Hashanah, 10/2. So this time of year, based on, Judeo calendars or whatever calendar you want to call it, September throughout the world in different nationalities and nations is celebrated in numerous ways. So I think that would add to the September timeframe, maybe.
wonderful
Yeah,
contributions.
Yeah, the time of atonement,
Time of Atonement, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
I was looking for a book and I just haven't been able to find it. But some years ago, our church sponsored this archaeologist.
I was thinking the same.
Yeah, and that's why I was looking for that book. And he's a first century archaeologist, and he wanted to research and did. He had a huge organization and a website and everything back then, but I haven't found it now. About what life would have been like for Jesus, what life would have been like for people living where he grew up. And he looked at both places. We look at Nazareth, but he talked about what the buildings were like. People think, there's a stable. And he said, well, stable really would have just been a carved out nook in the rock over which the people lived. It wouldn't be like a stable out in the backyard, right? A manger would have been a carved out piece of rock where they put feed, and he was very, very interesting. He talked about dating things using when the census took place. He said they needed this census for their tributes, and they had this really big one during Quirinius or whatever, how you pronounce that guy's name, that people had to go back to their to where their families were from to be counted, because that's the only way they can do it, to make everybody go in one place so you don't count them twice, right? And although they might have liked to count them twice. And so he tried to date things based on that. He also mentioned the thing about the sheep as well. But it was very interesting. He talked about,
I think that was like my first real exposure to biblical scholarship.
Archaeology and scholarship. Yeah, it was very interesting. I have a couple of his books and I just couldn't put my hands on it. I thought he talked about how tall people would be back then. he talked about what their education would be like. He said, Jesus lived in a very conservative place, but his father would have worked on this big Roman project that was being built. He probably would have gone with them. He talked about the that you would have to be able to speak Latin to talk to the people you worked for, but you'd have to be able to read Greek to see what all the designs were. And that they really weren't backwater people. They may have been very conservative religiously, but they were more cosmopolitan in what they knew and all back then. He talked about nobody would have turned anyone away. He said back then, if you went into a town, you know, where you were supposed to meet up with your relatives, they're not going to say, oh, there's no room in the inn. But he said that he felt the word inn was mistranslated, that it was the upper room of their family dwelling, where the animals were in the lower room and the upper room was where the family lived, and they were full. So they had to go down into probably the other reason he said was because she was pregnant. And if she gave birth, you couldn't give birth in the house. And so it was just very interesting to me to hear all this stuff. Yeah.
And this man also related a quote that has stuck with me all my life. That he went into a shop in the Middle East owned by this woman. And she said to him, what do you do, sir? And he said, well, I'm a biblical archaeologist. I'm looking for things from biblical times. And she clicked her tongue and said, you Christians, so many of you take the Bible literally, but not enough of you take it seriously. I've always
remember him saying that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I love this kind of stuff, John, where, you know, where we look into it. I taught history, and maybe that's why. I mean, maybe it's why I taught history, because I liked it. I used to always tell my students, you can memorize facts and stuff, but you're not learning history till you make connections between things that happen at the same time, and make connections between things that give meaning to the things that happen. And so I enjoyed talking about how you can get enlightened once you make connections. But I love all this kind of stuff. It doesn't mean that you give up the faith part, right? You know, the faith is there. I love the whole idea of the nativity scene. Who did that, Zach?
St. Francis.
St. Francis, yeah, okay. Because he felt like the people, I guess everybody knows this, but that the people could understand. They couldn't read or anything, but if they saw it, and they saw all the players there, that they could understand that Jesus was there for the very poor people and for the very wealthy people and the low and the exalted kinds of people, if you put them all together. And so to me, I would never want to give that up because of what's the word? Because it wasn't accurate, right? Because to me, it's a beautiful picture. Okay, go ahead. I'll stop talking.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
And all this also, when you were talking about the Pentateuch, it reminded me of my grandfather, who one visit showed me the marks, the accent marks.
Right. He was trying. In fact, one time you were in a restaurant and he's trying to write stuff and put the dots and the things and, you know, tell you there's no vowels, you know, and trying to get you to read all this stuff. It didn't take, but, you know, the Yiddish took better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Jody, you might, as a historian or a teacher of history, this is a side note. I looked up, why do Ethiopians celebrate the New Year on September 11th? And it says here, Queen of Sheba returned to Ethiopia from her visit to King Solomon in Jerusalem. So, you know, there's all kinds of little ways, of connections here.
Oh, yeah.
For the Ethiopian New Year.
Right.
You know,
and they supposedly have, you know, Solomon supposedly gave her the ark to keep, you know,
and they celebrate Jesus' birth. I'm going to look that up now, but it was celebrate Christmas
Oh.
and a different day too. So I have to look that up to give you, but it really is, we're really spiking some very interesting conversation, John.
Yes.
Right. Yes, and I think of my, Zach, tell me, my brain doesn't work well in the morning, words I've known my whole life. That's
Now
what
remember,
happens
you're
in the
being recorded,
70s, right?
John. You're being
Yeah.
recorded now, okay?
Okay, all right. all
Yeah,
right.
yeah, but nobody knows where it'll go.
Yeah. Michael's religion,
Greek Orthodox.
Greek Orthodox, they celebrate everything on a different day, but it's all based on the same, it's still December 25th, only when they think December 25th would have been, right? By a different calendar. So it's all very, and so I like the idea that yes, it's fun, and I get greater knowledge and greater confidence when I know some factual stuff, but it doesn't mean I'm going to ever give up my other, almost mystical stuff of how I see things through faith. So anyway, thank you very much. It was,
Well,
that was
here's
fun.
another note. Ethiopian Christmas is January 7th.
Yeah, that's like, I think that's like
Mhm.
the Greek Orthodox, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How
Any other-
fortunate, how fortunate, Neil, that you have an exposure to your neighbors in the Ethiopian
Yeah.
faith, Eastern Orthodox, and all of it combines together to bring us a world faith. And the Creator gave us minds to explore. We have explored enough to. That's why we have eyes on the front, because we can judge depth, we can measure distance, and that allows us to make plans
Well,
forward in
mind is what do some people say? The mind's a terrible thing. Or, Jesse will say to me, you know what I think? I said, no, don't go there. So maybe now would be appropriate time to stop the recording
Yeah.
I concur.
before we all get in trouble with the FCC.
You can edit it later, right?
No, I don't know how to edit yet. I haven't
Oh
learned.
yeah, we have another Zoom we go to, and the guy goes, "Okay, I got to go back and edit this in several places. It'll be out later."
Okay, here we go. You ready for the famous saying?